Okay, so let's talk about probably the most important golf club for amateur golfers, and it's the driver. If you are struggling with this golf club, as you are very aware, it makes the game just so much harder to score. And what I'm going to do in this video in particular is talk about what I tend to think is the biggest problem. And I think it's the sort of problem that you kind of know that you have, but you don't necessarily know exactly how to fix it. And you're going to kind of see that on the upcoming theme on the channel. It's going to become a real big focus in how we start the downswing, because there's absolutely no doubt that that sort of area between the top of the backswing and the start of the downswing is where I'd comfortably say 90% of golfers tend to get a little bit lost. Now, driver, what tends to happen with most golfers? Well, I'd say inconsistency, you know. So I meet golfers that can't really control the face. They tend to hit sort of push slices, and then you also meet the kind of golfer who potentially sort of gets quite hooky and quite miss-hitty, and yeah, you just sort of sacrifice distance, and then you sort of, you know, you start to doubt whether it's even worth using driver in the first place. But then you watch the golf on the telly and you notice how far and how straight they hit it and how much easier it makes the game, and you know it's the thing you should do. Now, what tends to happen, let's pick a narrative so it's easy to follow. So the majority of amateur golfers probably struggle with more of a sort of fade type bias, right? Which basically means that the ball goes squirting off towards the right hand side like that one. And the general, again, narrative would be, well, you've got an issue with your club face and your club path, which basically means that the club face was open and there's a possible chance that you were swinging too much out to in or whatever. So you put your emphasis at the bottom part of the golf swing. So when we talk about things like club path and trying to swing in and trying to close the face, you're really trying to look at a point in time in the golf swing, which is about, say, 12 inches, 6 to 12 inches prior to 6 to 12 inches post impact. But the thing that I think gets most misdiagnosed is actually you could have a really neutral club path and a really neutral club face and still find incredible inconsistency, which basically means you could actually get the club operating through this vicinity pretty well, but you can't quite hit the driver. And the reason why is because of the plane of the golf swing. And what the plane of the golf swing essentially just means is that if you kind of drew a line now through the heel of the golf club through my elbow, the idea is that's our sort of plane, which essentially means as we're coming into the downswing, we want the club shaft coming in on that type of plane in towards the hit. If you get more vertical, which basically means you come above that line, you can still manage your club path by sort of creating angles with your wrists and stuff, but you're never going to get that stability of the club face. Now that's the problem. And what will happen is occasionally you'll sort of, you know, should we say, stand up, as we'll talk about, and you'll still hit some straight shots and you'll be like, oh, that's the one that I'm after because it's sounding good. But the problem is, I suppose, from a sort of biomechanical perspective, it's not necessarily the most repeatable way to sort of move. So we need to think about it and we need to change it. And the way that we're going to change it really does stem a lot down to your sort of pivoting action. So what happens in the incorrect manner is that golfers will swing back, and as they start the downswing, the right hip or the trail hip comes forward, and this shoves everything over in this direction, which makes you swing on a more vertical plane. What we need to do is get more of the feeling of pulling the lead hip back, because this helps you create more space and gets the club shaft coming down a much shallower angle. So it is more about this motion, not this motion. This motion. And that's when you kind of get the old sort of tips about sort of keeping you back to the target. Because if I do it incorrectly, it's this way. Okay, see the way my head will also go forward and will get quite vertical and steep, as opposed to more keeping the back to the target, which is this way, pulling the lead hip back. Now, personally, I think if you're somebody who struggles with this, but you feel like you have, because you've watched the channel before, you feel like you have the know-how of what's happening, but you're struggling with the application to change it, I possibly feel like maybe it is worthwhile doing it quite slowly to get started with. Okay, so maybe you do go down to the driving range and you concentrate more on doing it at sort of 50%, similar to that. So that's probably carried 130, 140, something like that. But at least I know, because I'm operating at a much slower speed, I can actually feel myself pulling the lead hip back first, And I'm not, you know, I'm a professional golfer, so I get that I'm going to make it look easier, and there's going to be golfers that struggle with that. But what I suppose I'm politely trying to say is you have to start somewhere. And I think the easiest way for most amateur golfers to make a swing change is to do it slowly first. So if you can kind of get into the habit of doing it slowly, pulling the lead hit back, then you can start to do it quicker. And I suppose, you know, let's say that's sort of half speed roughly, and then let's say I try and do it that little bit quicker. So I go back, left hit back, and then I just sort of progress it further and further. Because what you will find, and we see this through the data on Flight Scope and the data on TrackMan and all the rest of it, is that actually, yeah, you could probably sacrifice some of your clubhead speed, become more efficient hitting it out the center of the face because you control your plane more, and still get the same distance. And that's when all of a sudden you can start to swing slower and hit it further, and the whole thing becomes more effortless. But what I promise you is that over time, if you practiced well enough and you did do it slowly, over time you will notice the way you're able to eventually pull that lead hit back and trigger much more speed. But the premise of this video, and what I really wanted to get across in the message, is you have to start thinking more about your angle that you're coming into the back of the golf ball on, and opposed to getting too much spinning. So it's more this way, pull the lead, hit back, and then through. That's what I wanted to get across today. So I think driver, spinny vertical, hit back. Got some great videos upcoming on this subject area you're not going to want to miss out on. So make sure you subscribe. I'll catch up with you guys again really, really soon.